INEC declares President Muhammadu Buhari winner of 2019 presidential election.
That Muhammadu Buhari of the All Progressives Congress, having satisfied the requirements of the law and scored the highest number of votes, is hereby declared winner and is returned elected. Thank you.
President Buhari appreciates Nigerians over election victory.
Senate and House of Representatives adjourn sittings for lack of quorum.
That we do adjourn till the 12th of March. Say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss matters arising from the 2019 presidential and National Assembly election results.
INEC chairman and returning officer of the 2019 presidential election, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, at about 4:37 a.m. this morning, declared President Muhammadu Buhari of All Progressives Congress winner of the February 23rd, 2019 presidential election held nationwide.
That's right, Kirian. President Muhammadu Buhari, according to the final returns, polled some 15.1 million votes, while his challenger, as the closest contestant, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, polled some 11.2 million votes.
All right, and according to INEC chairman, President Muhammadu Buhari, having scored the highest number of votes in the presidential election that had 73 candidates, is therefore returned elected.
That's correct, Kingsley. Kirian.
Yeah,
sorry, there's a lot of news that is popping up this morning. And the INEC chairman, of course, says that later today by 2 p.m., the president-elect and the vice president-elect will be presented with their certificates of return.
And that's indeed right, Kingsley. And eventually, the presidential election has been won and lost, and the next level policy of the APC is guaranteed. Recall that the INEC chairman put the voter turnout for the presidential election at 35% national average.
Now, the 2019 general election results, especially for the National Assembly, have also come with some electoral surprises, as some political bigwigs could not secure their seats in the legislature. From the results, we have also seen voting patterns that are subject to various interpretations. Some have won big, others have also lost big.
As a matter of fact, this is a keenly contested election, both the presidential and National Assembly. That's just said, many big weeks fell and all that. Well, we shall get into that as the program progresses. Now, it would appear the results so far released, especially for the National Assembly, show the thinking of electorate and perhaps their response to the politicking or campaigns that preceded the elections.
And with the winner of the presidential election already declared, what should be the disposition of the other contestants? In particular, what are Nigerians saying with regard to the outcome of the elections? What will be the impact of this on future polls? Because remember, on the 9th of March, we have the governorship and state houses of assembly elections. These are some of the issues our guests will respond to today as we analyze the outcome of the 2019 presidential and National Assembly election results. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I'd like to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. We are Africa's largest TV network, and we are right here, as always, at our Abuja headquarters studios.
And I am Kirian Umar. It's indeed good to have you join us on the program this morning. And as always, we shall bring you our complimentary segments, including newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment news. But let's begin with the morning news with Comfort Amodu as our anchor. Hello, Comfort.
Good morning, Kirian and Kingsley, and good morning, Nigerians. Here's the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari has been declared winner of 2019 presidential elections. The announcement was made by the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, at the International Conference Center, venue of the National Coalition Center. The president polled a total of 15,191,847 votes to beat his closest rival, Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, who polled 11,262,978.
That Muhammadu Buhari of the All Progressives Congress, having satisfied the requirements of the law and scored the highest number of votes, is hereby declared winner and is returned elected. Thank you.
By this announcement, President Muhammadu Buhari has been announced re-elected for another 4-year term. And President Muhammadu Buhari says he's deeply humbled and profoundly grateful to the millions of Nigerians for judging him worthy of continuing to serve as president of the country for the next 4 years. This was while reacting to the outcome of the just concluded presidential election, in which he was declared winner by the Independent National Electoral Commission.
I'd like to make a social appeal to my supporters, not to gloat or humiliate the opposition. Victory is enough reward for your efforts. Security agencies will step up their efforts to protect the voters in the forthcoming state elections. I would like to commend our security agencies, as severely outstretched as they are, for handling the difficult task of securing the country during the election period.
Meanwhile, the Buhari Media Organization, BMO, had earlier advised the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, to call President Muhammadu Buhari to congratulate him on his victory in the concluded presidential election. In a statement by its chairman, Ni Akinsiju, and said that President Buhari has the mandate of the majority of Nigerians who voted last Saturday for a second term in office. BMO says Alhaji cried the PDP's rejection of presidential election results announced by INEC as a recipe for disaster. He stressed that to doubt the general credibility of the 2019 election is to disregard the rules of election, which include tendering grievances before the courts. The statement advised the PDP chairman to withdraw his statement, apologize to Nigerians, and resign his position. The group is also urging Nigerians to maintain peace and unity this period and beyond. And Senate adjourned to 12th of March 2019, 1 hour after it reconvened from its 1-month recess. This is because it did not meet the quorum, which is 37 members. Instead, only 10 senators were present. Before the adjournment, Senate President Bukola Saraki had directed the ad hoc committee on the National Minimum Wage Bill to ensure that the bill is given the required consideration before its resumption.
But let me also say, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, that this is largely attributable to the current electoral situation across the country. Most of our colleagues who have contested are yet to get their results finally, formally, and officially declared, and therefore they needed to stay back.
Those in favor that we do adjourn till the 12th of March, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it.
As it was in the Senate, the House of Representatives also reconvened Tuesday and adjourned due to lack of quorum. The 60th Division Nigerian Army in Port Harcourt, Rivers State, has paraded a group of suspects alleged to be in possession of the 2019 presidential ballot papers. In a media briefing on the achievements of the military troops during the presidential and National Assembly elections, the Army spokesperson alleged that the Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike, alongside two of his government officials, were involved in an act to truncate the national democratic process.
Most worrisome and dangerous is the employment of political thugs by some desperate politicians to disrupt a legitimate national process for their pecuniary gains, particularly troops of 6th Division Nigerian Army with hefty financial inducements to help him in his illegitimate act of thwarting a free and fair electoral process to his favor.
The Army restated its commitment to remain apolitical, neutral and unbiased, as well as professionally responsive in discharging its constitutional duties. And now the Air Task Force of Operation Lafayette Dole has neutralized several Islamic State of West African province fighters as they assembled for a meeting at their hideout in Kolaram on the fringes of Lake Chad in the northern part of Borno State. A statement by the Director of Public Relations and Information, Air Commodore Ibukunle Daramola, says a Nigerian Air Force intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance platform called for 2 Alpha jet aircrafts to attack the group of buildings. Bombs from the first aircraft, Alpha jet, hit the desired target, causing damage and neutralizing some of the terrorists. Some of the surviving fighters engaged the aircraft with anti-aircraft and small arms fire, but were defeated. The NAF further states that operating with surface forces, it will keep sustaining its effort to completely destroy all remnants of the terrorists in the northeast. And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kieran after this break.
Sore throats, it's often caused by bacteria and viruses. Feels like they're having a party. You need Strepsils. It soothes the pain, plus it fights the germs with 2 germ-killing actives. Double power in 1 lozenge. Bye-bye sore throat. Take Strepsils.
Mass Medical Mission MMM is offering free services on a wide range of medical issues. Take advantage of these offers, especially by availing yourself of the National Cancer Prevention Program NCPP. You can do so by coming for our Wellness Wednesday program at 31 Bode Thomas Street, Surulere, Lagos every Wednesday from 7 a.m. You also have the opportunity of seeing the specialist and getting expert opinion on any health issues that may have been bothering you. Are you preparing to get married to your sweetheart? Then we have a premarital health program that will help you ensure that you start your married life on a healthy footing. Very important health screening and counseling will be made available for you and your partner. You can avail yourself of this opportunity by attending our Pre-Wedding Wednesday program from 7 a.m. For inquiries, send a mail to info@pinkcruise.org or log on to www.pinkcruise.org or call 0805-633-4288. Mission Pink Cruise, taking wellness to all.
Getting around heartburn and indigestion can be tricky if you eat too much. Eat food that is too spicy or greasy, or lie down after eating. Heartburn and indigestion could always be around the corner. When they come, be prepared with Gaviscon Double Action. It works within 3 minutes and lasts up to 8 hours. Gaviscon Double Action. Many causes, one solution.
Team huddle.
But we lost.
Don't be tired, guys. This isn't a loss. It's a practice for winning.
Nothing makes a mother prouder than seeing her child growing up. But I know as he learns to lead, he'll face even more dirt, germs, and risk of illness.
That's why in changing seasons, you need strong Dettol protection. Because Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Growing up needs Dettol protection.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now to some business stories. The Central Bank of Nigeria beefs up the forex market with additional $210 million. Plus, African Union charges member nations to focus on infrastructure to achieve intra-African trade. Let's join our correspondent, Kunle Adeyeye, for details of the stories.
The United Nations predicts that Africa's economic growth will reach 3.7% in 2019, driven by its human and natural resources, as well as trade in services and commodities. Regrettably, most trades on the continent are controlled by investors from continents like Europe and Asia. Africa Union's Commissioner for Energy and Infrastructure, Amani Abuja, said for intra-African trade to achieve the desired target, a peer review mechanism policy by member countries will fast-track the operationalization of the African Trade Agreement, which will open up Africa for improved commercial activities.
The issue of transport is of prime importance, and I did mention that we just launched also earlier in the year the African or the liberalization of the airspace or air transport in the continent in order to promote air transport, among other projects that we are having. We're also having all the road projects through what we call the African the program for infrastructure development in Africa.
In another development, the Nigeria Customs Service has pledged to focus on ports to check illicit importation and generate more income for the country. Comptroller General of Customs, Hamid Ali, said the service intends to achieve this through deployment of sophisticated technology.
It is our hope this year that we'll deploy the first 3 non-intrusive equipment at the major ports. And then subsequently, when we get our e-custom in place by this middle of the year or towards the end of the year, every port, both airport, seaport, and our border port will be covered by effective non-intrusive equipment.
And equities markets closed on Tuesday on a negative note as Nigeria Stock Exchange All-Share Index depreciated by minus 0.69% to close at 32,473.82 basis points, as against plus 0.57% appreciation recorded previously. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
Thank you, Kunle, for that business package. For us here on Good Morning Nigeria, the next is a newspaper review.
All right, newspaper reviewer Bayo Atebe is, of course, with us in the studios, and Kirian, the stories are right there on the front pages of the papers. One or two of the papers, of course, have not followed up with the latest in terms of the announcement of the ultimate winner of the presidential election. Well, let's begin by taking a look at The Guardian. The lead story for The Guardian, we have that on the screen now. It says Buhari gets his 4+4 and defeats Atiku with 15 million votes. Of course, the difference between Atiku and the winner is just about a little under 4 million. Buhari gets his 4+4. That's the way The Guardian captures it. Nigerian pilot says Buhari leads. Slightly belated. PDP kicks, asks INEC to halt further declaration of results. That again has become OBE, and that's overtaken by events. And just below the map and the other graphical information there, you have ECOWAS, AU, and EU caution on rejection of election results. That's on page 6. Kirian, let's take the
of course, the 3 newspapers I have here all are on the election results. And let's begin with the Nigerian Tribune. The Joint Tribune says Buhari wins 19 states, scores 15,191,847 votes. And it has a good number of riders to that. PDP demands release of card readers data once Yobe, Borno, Zamfara results cancelled. Seeks restoration of its cancelled valid votes in Nasarawa, Plateau, Kogi, FCT. 8 million Southeast voters disenfranchised, P2B alleges. Army detains Rivers Commissioner, 12 others over alleged possession of ballot papers and bribery. We're taking the GOC to the ICC, says Wike. All right, now, the New Telegraph is where we go next because it's just a similar headline. The New Telegraph. Buhari floors Atiku, secures 15.1 million votes, wins in 19 states. With the 3 riders, PDP candidate wins in 17 states, FCT, and Ghana's over 11 million votes. PDP, why we reject presidential election results. APC set for victory celebration party today. And now, lastly, Daily Sun newspaper also captures the release or declaration of the results this way. Presidential election result. Buhari is it. With the 2 riders. Comes tops with 15 million votes, wins Kaduna, Niger, Jigawa, Bauchi, Lagos, Kano, Katsina. PDP candidate wins 11 million votes, clinches Oyo, Anambra, Edo, Benue, Imo, Plateau, Adamawa, Taraba. Let's bring in Bayotebi now for the analysis of this declaration.
Thank you, Claire. Kiriel, a declaration of the winner of the 2019 presidential election has been made. Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, chairman INEC, who is the chief returning officer, announced Buhari Muhammadu scored 50,191,847 votes to Abubakar Atiku's 11,262,978. And he declared actually that Muhammadu Buhari, having scored the highest number of votes and having met the requirement, is hereby declared winner and returned elected. It happened at 4:38 a.m. And that is why some newspapers were caught off guard. There was a story Kingsley read said it is OBE.
The pilot, yes.
And you see the headline for Sun. What does it say there?
Buhari is it.
Buhari is it.
Yeah, I think they
all,
got it right.
all indications were heading towards it, but they were not very definite.
Sure.
That is
so
why.
So it was safe for them to not
yes,
say Buhari
that is very safe. In declaring the result, he announced the total votes scored by each of the 73 presidential candidates, including those who eventually said they were not participating. The votes scored were also announced. The total registered voters was put at 82,344,107. Total voters accredited for the election was 29,364,209. And this is about 35.6%. So you can see it's far, far, far below half of those who registered that actually turned out to vote. The newspapers have described it variously. Leadership says INEC declared Buhari winner of 2019 presidential election. Punch says Buhari wins second term. The Nation says INEC declares Buhari winner of presidential election. And the Tribune says Nigeria decides 2019, INEC declares Buhari winner. President Buhari won with huge votes in Northwest, North Central, Northeast, and Southwest. The highest votes came from Kano, Katsina, Kaduna in that order, followed by Borno, Bauchi, Jigawa, Niger, Kebbi, and Lagos. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar got his highest vote from Kaduna, followed by Delta, then Plateau, Anambra, Adamawa, Akwa Ibom, and Benue. President Muhammadu Buhari has thanked Nigerians for giving him another opportunity. The president made that declaration while he visited the campaign secretariat of the All Progressive Congress. He promised to give his very best to take Nigeria to the next level of development. He solicited for cooperation of all in moving Nigeria towards the task of nation building.
All right, Bayo, incidentally, that's the issue that we'll be having our conversation segment later on in the program, and we'll have guests to speak to all of these matters. But connected to the election, there are still stories that are floating around below the nameplate of the Guardian newspaper. 3 headlines. Is Rivers boys as Wike petitions ICC, that's International Criminal Court, and others over killings. Details can be found on page 3. On page 6, suspected Fulani herdsmen kill 16 in Kaduna community. And also on page 6, market capitalization drops by 85 billion naira in 6 hours. And for the Nigerian pilot, you have also the stories there. It says tension below the nameplate of the Nigerian pilot. Say tension in Kaduna as 16 persons allegedly killed in Kajuru reprisal attacks. That's page 5. Saraki breaks silence on defeat. Says winners are not his enemies. Page 11. And right at the foot of the front page, let's take 3 or 4 headlines there. Akume's loss. I told Benue people I will retire him politically. That's according to Otom. Presidential poll, stock exchange capitalization loses 85 billion naira in 6 hours. That story is also on the front page of The Guardian. INEC to review election results from Nasarawa, and the Joint National Congress condemns violent election.
All right, let's turn to the New Telegraph for election-related stories and other ones. At the top of the nameplate, we have 17 governors, ex-governors head for the Senate. It's on page 3. And then just below the nameplate, we have Autumn, I have retired Akume from politics for playing God. That's on page 12 now. Then INEC apologizes over drunk returning officer. It's on page 12. Stock market shares as Kingsley read 85 billion naira as Nigerians await presidential result. It's on page 12. Now, how 8 boys gang raped me by UNILAG teenage student. It's on page 7. And on the foot of the New Telegraph, we have bandits kill policeman, 44 others in Sokoto, Kaduna, police van, houses, churches burnt. Buhari El-Rufai meet over attack. There is this warning here. In fact, the last line on the New Telegraph, it says, women working long hours face higher risk of depression. So page 8 is an interesting story for you to read. Let's return to Bayo once again.
Well, let's return to the elections. And there are some dissensions about the election result that has been announced. The People's Democratic Party had demanded a halt to the collation of the election results. At a press briefing, Dr. Tanimu Turaki had cited alleged manipulation, rigging, and overvoting as some of the states. In fact, during the collation, a representative of the People's Democratic Party, Osita Chidoka, had also raised objection and had presented a letter after the collation, but the INEC chairman advised that the letter should be taken to the INEC office and should be acknowledged. Also, the representative of the All Progressive Congress, a senior advocate of Nigeria, Festus Keyamo, also reeled out allegations regarding violations in some South states as far as the elections concerned. Meanwhile, so far, there's only one presidential candidate, that of the National Democratic Party, Dr. Robson Akua, who has congratulated President Muhammadu Buhari. He said the victory is a clear acceptance by majority of Nigerians from all due political zones. The sad story you reported about Kaduna, it is said that some Fulani headsmen were going to look for their cows, and at the end of the day, it ended up becoming a reprisal. It happens at the same Kajuru area that you had it. But the danger there is that there's been a spillover now into Kachia area. And that was why the governor, Nasir Ahmed El-Rufai, yesterday had to visit President Muhammadu Buhari, and the security people have been advised to take strong measures to end that. Finally, however, let's look at the Senate. This story you mentioned, Kirian, about Senate. 66 of the current 109 senators actually contested election. About 50% of them got re-elected. So the Senate in the 9th Assembly is going to see about a little over 70 new senators. For the House of Representatives, of the 360 members, it is not quite clear. The results are still far trickling in, and the compilation is not giving a clear picture of what the situation is like.
Okay, now let's go to Daily Sun and take the story at the bottom of the Daily Sun newspaper. 27 killed in fresh Kajuru attack in Kaduna. We've read that. It's on page 44 of the Daily Sun. Rivers polls, who will drag GOC others to court. Army parades electoral offenders in Port Harcourt. Now, Senate seat, I was rigged out, says the Saraki. Now, bandits kill 16 in Sokoto.
All right, but I think Bayo has effectively discussed those stories. We'll see. I'm sure by tomorrow there will be many more stories with regard to the presidential elections and its outcome. Now, let's take our editorial. It's coming from the Daily Independent newspaper. The editorial is coming from the Daily Independent newspaper, and it's at page 16. And its title is Tracking Campaign Expenses of Political Parties. Tracking campaign expenses of political parties. Editorial begins. It says the decision of the Independent National Electoral Commission to deploy devices to track campaign expenses of political parties should merit the commendation of well-meaning Nigerians, although such a statutory stipulation ought to have received firm and thorough enforcement before now. It adds that INEC has said that it is engaging the assistance of EFCC and the Financial Intelligence Unit to enable it undertake this onerous task. The paper welcomes the collaboration, but notes that one major obstacle to monitoring the movement of money in Nigeria is the largely informal financial operations that subsist, whereby about 60% of funds in the country are outside the banking system. Now, to succeed in this endeavor, INEC must insist that every donation to candidates and parties must be done through banks together with all financial transactions in respect of the campaigns.
That's a Herculean task. Campaign financing has been a critical challenge. In spite of limitations that have been placed for each candidate that is contesting about the amount that can be spent, indications are that most often than not, they tend to spend more than that. There's also the tendency and the inability of the INEC itself to record acclaimed voluntary donations by persons. You find a group of persons coming and announcing that they have bought a ticket for a candidate at a certain value. They also make donations to the parties at certain value, which most often than not is difficult for INEC to track. But for the current election, INEC did set up a committee, and they are working with regulatory agencies in broadcasting and the media to keep tab on the quantity and the volume of advertisement and the expenses that has been. Let's see how far they can go with that, but that is a direction. But the positive and the most positive direction, however, is what has been mentioned in the editorial, to ensure that all expenditures are routed through the bank. But you know that our nation is such that the informal sector is heavier and bigger, far, far bigger than the formal sector. So that becomes a Herculean task.
In the comparative analysis, if you look at the spending of money in Nigerian politics as we had it some years back, there's a difference this time around. There's a drop, a sharp drop. People acknowledge the fact that there is a sharp drop in terms of the kind of funds that were used in this particular election. That people who normally are seasonal businessmen when it comes to election, didn't get exactly what they bargained for this time around because of lack of funds in circulation during the electionary campaign.
Yeah, it's not because the money is not there. People will tell you informally that the money is there, but people are afraid to bring it out because there's a new sheriff in town.
All right, Kinsley.
Nothing to add.
Okay.
So Bayo, we would like to thank you. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you too.
And it's Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll be discussing the 2019 presidential election and National Assembly election results.
So, how do I look, guys?
Aha! I see what's wrong.
What?
The wall doesn't match your elegance.
Then we must do something about it right away.
At Royal Ceramics, we offer you a wide range of beautiful wall and floor tiles designed specially to fit your lifestyle.
So, what do you guys think?
Thank goodness we changed to Royal Ceramic tiles.
I agree.
Like mother, like daughter.
Royal Ceramics, finish in style.
A new edition of TV Guide is out with special focus on the role of the media in election coverage. Exclusive on the National Broadcasting Commission, its mandate as the sole regulator of Nigerian media. Dr. Toba Daba then and Ishak Modibo Kawu now. This edition also features the king of stand-up comedy in Nigeria, Ali Baba. NTA standards to be ready for election transmission after decades of abandonment. Find out from the DG transactional elections in our political space. An evil wind that blows no good. DG, National Orientation Agency cautions. TV Guide, your indispensable companion, x-rays the impact of social media on electioneering process as electorates present their expectations from incoming government. Meet some TV professionals behind the screen and other inspiring stories in sports, entertainment, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
My name is Smart. I'm a professional electrician and I only use the best cables in Nigeria. Nokako is one of Nigeria's most leading cable manufacturers. Nokako carries out rigorous quality control tests on its products at every stage of the production process, so its high quality is maintained throughout the full length of the conductor that meets both national and international standards. These cables are manufactured in a state-of-the-art cables and wire plant equipped with the most advanced machinery and processes. Nokako is certified by the Standard Organization of Nigeria and is an NIS Diamond Award winner.
Be like Smart by Nokako.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission and chief returning officer for the 2019 presidential elections, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, at about 4:37 a.m. today, declared incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari of the All Progressives Congress, APC, winner of the February 23, 2019 presidential elections that took place nationwide last weekend. President Buhari, according to the chief returning officer, polled 15,191,847 votes to beat his closest rival, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, who polled 11,262,978 votes. That's the outcome, according to INEC, of the presidential election. Of course, there were 73 candidates on the ballot, but we're taking on the winner and the closest challenger. Joining us now in the studios to access the outcome of the 2019 election results, let's welcome Dr. Mutar Imam. He's lecturer in the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy at Base University here in Abuja. Dr. Imam, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. And also here with us in the studios is Mr. Oke Epiam. He's Executive Director, Order Paper Nigeria, a multi-platform media organization that is dedicated to reporting legislative activities. Okay, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. And we equally have in the studio Austin Iwe, an election observer and senior program officer, Center for Democracy and Development. Thank you for joining us.
It's really an honor to be here.
And from our Benin Network Center is Tonio Abolo, a public affairs analyst. You are welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Also from our Maiduguri Network Center, is Dr. Ibrahim Sadiq of the Department of Political Science, University of Maiduguri. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, gentlemen, you're welcome. Maybe Kingsley will take the first shot.
Well, the first shot is simply to ask, what do you think of the outcome of the presidential election as announced just about 3 hours ago or so now that we had a formal declaration. Let's begin with the guests who are with us here in the Abuja studios. Dr. Imam, what's your take on the formal announcement of the winner of the election?
Well, thank you once again for having me. As expected, it's the statutory responsibility of the umpire INEC to deliver that message of goodwill, if you like, to the people. INEC has done fairly well in conducting the just concluded general election. There were some hiccups as expected. It's only human that we have this sort of issues thrown up, but ultimately, I think the process was fairly done. INEC should be given commendation for what has happened in the course of the election. And yes, of course, as Nigerians would expect, the elections have come and have gone. The post-election period is what we should look up to and hope that it turns good for the betterment of every Nigerian.
You know, there are usually many dimensions to every election, hiccups, as you mentioned, and other issues arising from every election. Now we are doing assessment. Let's ask Uke Epia to also air his views on the just concluded election.
Well, first and foremost, I would like to congratulate the winner of the election, the incumbent president. I also congratulate Nigerians for turning out in their numbers to discharge their civic responsibilities, and also to commiserate, we must not miss this point, the families of those who have lost loved ones, family members. That is not a good commentary on the elections, but by and large, I think that we have made some progress. Let me also congratulate members of the National Assembly whose results who have been declared returned as elected across the country. This is one critical arm of government that we must also put sufficient emphasis on if we must see progress and development take place in this country. So by and large, INEC has discharged its responsibilities. There are shortcomings here and there are a few defects. You know, we must take into account some of these in making a post-mortem of the elections process. And it is not just INEC. Every stakeholder needs to look inwards and make a thorough post-mortem. Civil society, security agencies, citizens, you know, everyone's had a role to play. We must do a review and see where we made, you know, some errors, where we made some, you know, could progress, give commendations, and then prepare for. I must say again, too, that the next elections begins immediately because it's a process. And so if we do a post-mortem, we should begin to put a house in order awaiting the next set of elections.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, now let's bring in Austin Aigbe, who is an election observer as well as a senior program officer at the Center for Democracy and Development. Finally, the outcome of the presidential election has been formally announced. What is your initial comment?
It is important to state, let me just also follow the line of congratulating those who have won. It is important to state that because it is a statutory responsibility of Independent National Electoral Commission to declare results. Whatever results you have that you may claim to have is inconsequential because you don't have the authority to declare results. But as an observer, we don't pay particular attention to results. We pay attention to the process leading to the results. Because the results alone doesn't speak. It is a process that people tend to look at. For us, I'm sure that's probably why people thought there are hiccups here and there. There are huge gaps in terms of the procedure. We do know by the guideline, there are certain, where there is violence or smart carrier that didn't work, such units or area ought to be cancelled, but we do know that those areas are flow in. So there are really process challenges that we must deal with if we must begin to strengthen our democratic architecture. We know, too, that if you look at results as a standalone, we are never going to deal with the architecture as it were, because from the polling unit up to collation point, up to the final declaration, you need to pay attention to each of those areas. In many state collation centers, collation never happened. They were taken straight to the local authority. Whereas the law says that you must move from the polling unit to the ward collation, then to the local government, to the state, then to the federal, which is the point where we were at the International Conference Center. So for the now, congratulations to those big winners, and I think it's important that people, we just seen the end of a phase. So I'm too sure that we're going to enter another phase very shortly.
Okay, now we're hoping that the phase we're going to enter will be very peaceful. Let's turn to Benin, where we have Tony Abolo, a public affairs analyst. Well, we'll say that this election, started with postponement in the first place, which many believed was going to deter Nigerians from actually coming out to vote on the 23rd. But it didn't. From all indications, many Nigerians turned out to vote. Some traveled again to their bases to be able to vote. And of course, we know that election process is not only tedious, it's rigorous, and of course, they're complex. But today, we have had results from the INEC chairman. What's your take on the process?
Well, if I may comment on that process, just like Aigbe was trying to analyze, we must begin to look back again on the process that has brought us to this, call it the ending of 2019 elections. But it's to be said that the process was not as smooth as we would have thought going forward. And again, if I may take on from your question, when we had the experience of the postponement, yes, there were initial fears and apprehensions that there was going to be a voter apathy. But that didn't happen. Rather, it energized a lot of Nigerians. But then again, when you look at it in line with the final figures, one is a bit disappointed. When you had 70-something or 80-something people registered to go and vote, and then the outcome is about 20-something million. And that doesn't show that we have moved quite forward. And we didn't quite do better than we did in 2015. And a lot of things that happened, talking about the hiccups, seem to have taken us back to even 1959. It's rather, when we begin to talk about violence, ballot box snatching, deaths, and so on, what have we gained? So I think it's time we began to look at technology. If we must move to that era of technology that eases the process and makes it less cumbersome. And then we may now say we're advancing. But what has happened is a repetition of the past.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Tony Abolo. Tony Abolo, of course, is a very senior media practitioner. And we'll have the opportunity of tapping into your history resource, in discussing the outcome of this election. But let's go very quickly to our Maiduguri Network Center and bring in Dr. Ibrahim Sadiq of the Department of Political Science at University of Maiduguri. Dr. Sadiq, let's have your initial take on the outcome, first of the presidential election.
Thank you. I think I will take it from Mr. Abolo's analysis just now. He was talking about the elections taking us to the 1959 or so. I think, yes, he may be right. But then we have to look at the issue areas. You see, this is Nigeria. Nigeria is a complex society. And the complexity is in such a way that our own elections and all other issues that border on organized interests, on public interests, I think are sharply divided along ethno-religious lines. And if you see the elections, the just concluded general elections, the voting pattern, the voting behavior reflects that. If you go to the southeast, the Igbos collectively and enthusiastically voted for Atiku. It's not Atiku. They were looking at Obi, the person behind Atiku, as their own kinsman. And if you look at the southwest, you see there's a preponderance of votes from there. And you don't look at Buhari in that sense. They are voting for Osinbajo. So at the end of the day, you discover that there is political apathy, there is voter apathy. Now, our political behavior, our voting behavior has not changed from the 1959 he's talking about. We are talking about religious lines, ethnic lines, regional lines, and I think we should go beyond that. But Abolo is right that we are going backwards. Yes, but there are many ways of changing this situation. We are talking about the policy issue areas. Now, when you have a government that does its things, not putting into cognizance the public need, that is the collective need. Today, you see, voters go to the polls, but they actually do not have a clear-cut reason for going to the polls. We do not vote along issue lines. We vote along personality lines. People who are voting yesterday, I mean, on 23rd of February, they were voting for Buhari, they were voting for Atiku, they are voting for others as personalities, not based on issues. And that is why we are still lingering in the ethnic closet. Nobody is trying to go beyond that. Nobody is trying to change that. We are looking at the Atikus, we are looking at the Buharis, we are looking at the Osibajos, we are looking at the Obis. And that is why we are now stuck in the ethnic cocoon. We are not going outside of that, outside the box. We should think beyond that. So I think the general elections is a reflection of what he rightly pointed out, the 1960s politics of regionalism and ethno-religious considerations. When we vote based on issues. What are the issues? Our educational sector is going backward. The health sector is begging for improvement. We have a lot of issues. These are things that we should be looking at. But the Nigerian masses do not even have the party manifestos. I want to challenge any high-level politician, that is the elites, the political elites, that they have not in any way made available the party manifestos to their own people. So the people do not even know their expectations from the votes they are now busy giving, because they do not even know what the parties are promising. They do not even know how to manage their own expectations in terms of government and governance, whoever wins. Now, I think we have a situation here, Mr. Odeba. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll return to you for further analysis. But now looking at the general characteristics, of this election, he actually made some point with respect to the voting pattern of Nigerians, which is ethnic based and what have you. But in places like Ondo or your Atiku won election in those states, they're in the southwest. There's a reasonable element of people, thinking objectively in terms of this voting, but perhaps the preponderance of those who voted along ethnic lines, maybe higher. Now, let's return to Abuja here, to Dr. Mukhtar Imam. Well, how would you assess INEC in all of this exercise? We have all appreciated the fact that the process of electioneering, especially when you conduct an election, is very complex. And knowing Nigeria with all the terrains that we have in different parts of the country, how would you rate INEC, their outing, in this exercise?
Well, to do that succinctly, we would need to make a comparative analysis from what has happened in the past as against what we have experienced in the just concluded elections. As far as INEC and preparations and, of course, delivering and logistics and all of that is concerned, I think INEC performed above board. That's the reality. Now, in comparison to what we had in 2015, where sensitive and non-sensitive materials couldn't basically get to certain regions of the country, I think significantly progress have been made judging from what happened or transpired in the 2019 general election. So INEC as an umpire seems to have done magnificently well. And then to the other issue, which is about voter registration and also voting at the same time, I think that's something that basically brought about some level of quick delivery when it got to voters cast votes in the polling unit and election centers. And then again, of course, the use of the smart card readers. As much as we talk about issues that the card readers had in some quarters, I think it performed significantly well. We recorded tremendous success as far as the use of the smart card is concerned. So ultimately, for me, I think judging from what happened in 2015 and what we just experienced in the 2019 general elections, INEC has performed above board as far as that is concerned.
And not forgetting that the chairman of INEC had to apologize, Kingsley, for a drunk staff on duty, but that's absurd.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, Kirian, and then to our guest, you know, the process is something that would take a long time to actually deconstruct, seek to understand, and then make recommendations. Of course, we can always throw it in the course of the conversation, but dealing with the raw numbers that we have in the outcome of, say, the presidential election, and okay, of course, APR was referring to the National Assembly elections, which is also very significant. I would like us to deal with maybe with some of the numbers. The country had 84+ million registered voters. 72.7 million collected their PVCs. Voter turnout, according to the INEC chairman, who is chief returning officer for the presidential election, nationwide around about 35%. 35%, of course, is based on 84 million. But when you look at the cost of producing the materials for those who were registered to vote, and the number of persons who eventually turned up, what does this tell us? I mean, is this apathy or what? I mean, 30%, of course, it could be good in some even advanced democracies, but what does it say about the national average in terms of turnout? Okay.
Well, I think it speaks again to the performance of INEC to a very large extent. The statistics that you have given show that confirms points earlier made that Nigerians were enthusiastic to want to perform their civic responsibilities. I did observe the elections as a media person myself. I saw many Nigerians who turned out, but had issues with, locating their polling unit. They had issues. A lot of Nigerians could not vote. You know, a significant number of Nigerians could not vote. They showed up. They did show up at the polling units, you know. Again, what does that say? It speaks to the logistical arrangement INEC must have put in place, you know. So I think that with respect to the figures and the reality on ground, we should be cautious in giving thumbs up to INEC. INEC needs to be put on the spot. We should give them commendation where they have done well, but I think that we need to also call them out. It is not, I think, salutary that we have a cancellation of votes of over 1 million at the presidential elections. What has led to that? If over 1 million Nigerians or thereabouts showed up to vote and you had their votes voided or cancelled, that's significant, you know, because the difference we're looking at between the two, the candidates at the presidential elections is just about 4 million thereabouts. So if you had that 1 million counting, that would have made the tally different, you know. So how do you address that? How do you also address the situation where, you know, people who, INEC officials at polling units, you know, were not also able to start on time, deploy on time. There were issues with respect to the conduct, you know, the takeoff of the elections, so to speak, you know. So all of these impacted on the figures that we have. And I think that, like I said, it's a process, and I think that we have not, while we have not fully interrogated the process and the elections itself very well, we should be cautious in giving INEC credit, because INEC needs to explain to Nigerians what really happened. We need to do a thorough audit of INEC. Why were that large number of cancellations? Why were there that large number of, incidents of violence? Maybe not too large, but, was there a disconnect between INEC and security officials? Why were there that, disconnect between what people wanted to, the aspirations of people and what eventually happened? So, like I said earlier, every stakeholder involved has, a point to be able to look at and come back to the table to say, look, this is where we erred, this is where we had shortfalls, these were the gaps, and how do we make progress, going forward, including the media, civil society, citizens, security agencies. It's not all about INEC, even though INEC is the chief, responsibility institution for the elections. But I think that we need to do a thorough postmortem and ask ourselves questions. For me, it's not about apathy. Nigerians were very enthusiastic to vote. I also I support the position that's been expressed that I think that we have retrogressed with respect to the processes and maybe the outcome of these current elections. The figure speaks to that point.
All right, thank you. It's important to actually note that the violence recorded, we were mainly in the southern part of the country during this election. And if we have time, we could also look at why that should be so. Why should such violence concentrate in one part of the country in a general election as we had it? Now, Austin Iwe is actually an observer, and I'm sure he must have visited one or two polling units here in Abuja, and is in the right position to actually discuss the issue of INEC's performance. Of course, Opia talked about voided votes, you talked about malfunctioning of card readers and what have you. In your opinion, how did INEC perform in all of this?
So it's important to do some kind of a backstop analysis. Elections were postponed from February 16th to 23rd, basically because of logistics. And sincerely, on the 23rd, the logistics resurfaced. Because in certain or in many polling units, election did not start about 11, some 1 p.m. on election day. Just behind us here, somewhere around Maraba and Masaka, 11 p.m., voters were still waiting for materials. Whereas, this is not supposed to be a far-to-reach location. It's an election day, no movement. So you expect that it has to be an easy ride from the rack centers. So going back, when you look at the figures, like already brought forward, 29.3 million people accredited, not turnout. So we must be very conscious of those figures. Those accredited were the figures used to determine the percentile. I will argue there were more people who could not vote, like my friend already talked about, or places where people turn out to vote and eventually violence, somewhere like in Lagos. Lagos has 6 million people accredited. PVC collected. Whereas about less than 1 million or about 1 million turn out to vote. What does that tell us? It tells us that in Lagos specifically, there may be huge number of areas that people could not vote. You won't tell me that they don't have up to 2 or 3 million people turning out. Well, I don't know because I wasn't in Lagos, but from the footage we saw, it is clear that there were, particularly if you look at Ogota and elsewhere, you see the huge number of people who had voted whose votes were no longer useful because certain of those ballot papers were destroyed. You go to Rivers, 2 local government elections did not hold. You go to Kaduna, footage shows that military has prevented voters from accessing their units. All of those small pockets amount to turnout that did not play a role in accredited number of voters. And when I saw the figure released by INEC that total register of voters is 82 million, I was embarrassed because we know total number of registered voters is 84 million. So what happened to the 2 million that wasn't recorded? So there are a lot of issues, process-wise, procedural-wise, because when we look at just the end product, we may lose focus in terms of strengthening our democratic architecture. My opinion is that, like already brought for INEC, there need to be a lot of explanation in terms of what really happened. And we need to also know in calculation-wise, all of these areas that were cancelled, all of these areas that elections did not hold, how many total numbers? So we can begin to make sense, because the total number between the winner and the loser is 3.9 million. So what's the figure of these other areas? Which area did not use a smart card reader? That were cancelled in some areas and other areas went through. We need to interrogate a lot of things before we draw a conclusion.
All right, Mr. Austin, thank you very much. I said earlier that, the process is a matter that will always come in when we are discussing the numbers arising from the elections. But let's go over to our Benin Network Center and bring in again Mr. Tony Abolo. Mr. Tony Abolo, we're talking about the voter turnout and relating that to number of PVCs collected and also the number of registered voters. You're having just about under 30 million of persons who were accredited. There have been reports, and some of the guests here have spoken also to that issue, of what some would describe as vote suppression mechanisms, logistic challenges, violence and disruption, and of course, ultimate frustration. Is this a playback of some of the kind of things that we used to see in the First and Second Republics and then earlier part of the Fourth Republic? But even then, how much of an impact could that have had on the outcome of the presidential election?
Well, definitely it is a playback of our past, and it merely reinforces our ethnic or ethno-religious differences. And I don't know why we have not even interrogated ourselves. Do elections produce the kind of outcome that we want? Rwanda, I know, has a different example in trying to elect its own public officials. And we must begin to ask ourselves, because if we don't answer this question, even now, it just means that in 2023, we'll repeat the same errors. After every elections, what happens? The country gets more divided, more, the tendencies that tend to separate us seems to be more emphasized. And I don't think that that is good for the polity. So I think we ought to begin to ask ourselves, maybe like I think Dr. Mukhtar was saying, we need to begin to look at how the civil society, the media, religious organizations, if at all, and important personalities can begin to examine how we live our ethno-religious behaviors and begin to think of nation building, because our politics or our elections don't deliver nation building. And that ought to begin to become a matter of concern. Because if we are not uniting with every election, rather it is dividing us, then we ought to ask ourselves, what should we do? Because if we are now going to go forward, remember you were even raising an issue not too long ago about the post-election considerations. We don't know what may happen. We don't know what may be the PDP that says they want to offer a challenge. What are they going to do? What will be their position? And if not a major party like that, what about the other little parties? What will they do? And are we just going to hide and paper the cracks over, or come out and say to ourselves? Because if we are going to continue this killing, every time it's killing, every time there's violence, every time there's ballot box snatching, it just shows that the politicians are really the guilty people, and not even INEC that sometimes we tend to vilify. And that's why I even, in my first opening comments, I talked about technology. Why should we now make collation such like as if it was a rocket science? By law, once the voting ends, you count, you paste the results at the polling unit. And with today's cell phones and whatever it is, you can send that message to the ward, to the local government, to the state, and to the INEC headquarters. So what is it that we're doing that we just keep going in the dark? And it is the politicians who are struggling to ensure that they keep manipulating the process. Because once you dislocate this aspect of not taking it quickly from the collation, from the polling unit to the central point, you have introduced fraud. And we should remove fraud from the system, because it is the politicians who are keen on allowing fraud. And then, of course, those who feel that they have spent so much money to even get nomination, then after that, go around campaigning. Then it means that you have also seeded the violence, the thuggery, and all that goes, and the criminalities that go with it. So we must begin to examine how we disengage our politics from all this violence and those shenanigan behavior that everybody's talking about. It's known all over Africa that this is the behavior. Are we going to wait here for 2023 for another set of violence, or are we going to go into elections? Are we going to nation building? That is going to be the challenge. So if now that APC has been announced as the winner, I think they ought to lead the discussion, because we're not even having national conversations around important issues. How do we build this nation? If we go back into our little enclaves and into our ethnic corners and begin to argue, we are not having a central point where we now tell ourselves we must take the conversation outside the politicians, because it's the politicians who are muddling the waters.
Thank you very much. But I still want to stay with you in Benin Network Center, Mr. Tony Abolo, and then over to Ibrahim Sadiq, also in Maiduguri, because you've referenced the ethnic and religious issues in our elections, again saying that tended to have played a part in this election. But some persons would argue that there was a presumption of a real contest afoot when the PDP and the APC announced their candidates for the 2019 elections, unlike what we had in 2015, where the country's usual ethnic and religious fault lines were exacerbated on the basis of North versus South. But in this case, the two leading candidates were from the same part of the country, from same North, same religion, the same ethnic group, and so there was a presumption that this was going to be a real fight. How then did ethnicity and religion come to play a factor, play a role in this election? Or was it just, by some other consideration that came up last Saturday?
Kingsley, I think you made a valid point. And again, it's a surprising aspect to observe in this last elections. So we thought, because we thought it was going to be rather economic rather than this ethnic religious divide. Economic in the sense of, we saw that APC was rather pro-poor in terms of their policies, and PDP, for example, looking at the main challenges, whereas PDP seemed to have been looking at how to lift up the economic basket and say to ourselves, we're having a bigger cake to share. So we thought that was going to be the argument. But then, the tendency in Nigeria is that, and like my friend Dr. Ibrahim did say, what tends to happen is when it comes to this contest, there is no clarity of understanding. There's so much ignorance. And the politicians love to play to call it the talakawas, and the peasants and the poor people, because they are looking for numbers. And so they go for the ignorant people who are not even aware of the issues and want to get the numbers from there. But if they were explaining themselves, we were all going to ask ourselves, if you are going to do pro-poor, for example, the attitude of saying, okay, you want to work for the poor, does that lift the economic well-being of this nation? Does that take us and increase the FDI and the FPIs, the foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment? Do they come into the country to generate a bigger economy? Or we are going to be addressing poor people? And when you're addressing that, it may constrict the economy. And that is the kind of language and explanations we ought to be making to the people, so they make informed choices. After all, we are also speeding up the process of elections. Let's compare ourselves, because we need to be very intellectual and very academic about these exercises. And why I say this is, before you had universal suffrages in other developed democracies, they were going through age, gentry, economy, sex. All that was being looked at before it came to universal suffrage. Though, what has happened? We carried it whole line, hook and sinker, away from the Western world, and we have implanted it. And we're going ahead without asking ourselves, should this be the process? We have to ask ourselves very reasonable questions about how we ought to conduct our politics. Because our politics is not bringing about development. And again, it's bad enough that even in the Western world, in their studies, they are saying that even democracy does not even deliver economic outcomes. But we like to believe that we can make an effort and see that the kind of politics we play is not about, call it stomach infrastructure, but it's about, like the Chinese would say, the tide lifts all the boats. So we like to believe that our politics ought to be looking at the country. How do we leave this nation? How do we become a prosperous nation in the 21st century? I like to see that maybe now that APC is declared the winner, that they can sit down and say to themselves, where do we take this country to? And let's all have a national conversation. It's not about APC or PDP or YPP or whatever party. It's about Nigerians sitting down to ask ourselves, how do we grow? We have not had that conversation. And it keeps separating us. And the politicians love it that way.
Well spoken and of course interesting perspective to this conversation. But Kingsley and I guess you will notice that when it comes to ethnic bias, it's not just peculiar to Nigeria, because in the last election in America in 2016, we started hearing about Hispanics. We started hearing about people with color. As a matter of fact, some state governments, they had some law or policies that disenfranchised so many people of color in America. So it's been there. And as Tony Abulu indicated, it started way back in the 50s, pre-independence era. And it has continued to happen. And some may describe that the ethnic bias that influences our election to the issue of orientation of the people. This election actually is an opener to the fact that we still carried forward what we had before independence to the present day election. And don't be surprised that it could reoccur in 2023. So it's a very pertinent issue to discuss. And I'd like Dr. Ibrahim Sadiq to take a cue from what Tony Abulu just told us a short while ago with respect to the issue of ethnic bias in our elections.
Yeah, I still want to retain my position that the elections, as in the older days, still remain ethno-religious. They still reflect the complexity of our nation state. If you like, our pseudo-nation. Nigeria, is not a nation by definition in the strict sense of the nation. A nation is a pseudo-nation. A pseudo-nation in the sense that we have multinational entities, we have different ethnic groups, we have different religions, we have different gods that we worship, we have different, everything different. And I want to take exception to what Mr. Kingsley has just said, that, okay, the contestants for presidency are from the north. All of them are from the same part of the country. Yeah, I agree with that. But I made it clear when I was talking about the issue of ethnicity, that it is not about Buhari or Atiku. You see, in Nigeria, we are not doing things. Our own people are not doing things to promote mankind. We do things to promote my kind. And that is talking about your own kinsmen. Now, the Yoruba man behind Buhari is the issue in Southwest. And the Igbo man behind Atiku is the issue in the Southeast. This, I want to believe, informed the voting behavior of the people from the Southeast and the Southwest. I mean, the electorate. Look at what is happening things will have changed. Things will have been better. But look at, let's take an example from Kigali. You see, what Kagame is doing in Rwanda, I think, is the best option. When you take the Kigali option, you see, Kagame has now made it a law in Kigali that if you are discussing politics and you as much as suggest that one ethnic group is lording it over the other, it's an offense against the state. And they will take you up on that. And there are very, very strict measures to tackle, I think, imprisonment or something beyond that. And if Nigeria will take that measure, that is to say, to instill discipline, among Nigerians, to force them into believing that we are one. Because already our own unity, we call it unity in diversity. There is some sense of confusion there. Of course, we cannot be united and be diverse. We are diverse, that's the reality. But the unity, I think in the next 50 years, the way we are going, we cannot be united in the literal sense of the word unity. and even in the technical sense, we cannot be united. Because each time we relate, in our subconscious mind, we always think about our own kith and kin. We also think about where we are coming from. I remember, I think, what Azikiwe and Sardona were discussing at their own time. When Azikiwe said we should work, as one people. That is the political elite. We should come together, we should unite, we are one and the same people. And Sardona said, no, Mr. Azikiwe, I am a Muslim and a Northerner. You are a Christian and a Southerner. We better understand the difference among ourselves before we come together and work for our own people. Because if we try to forget our differences, I think we are just...
all right, Dr. Ibrahim Sadiq, thank you very much. We'll pause you in the meantime and return to you. We have some tweets, but just before we take those tweets, again, let's take a look at what has happened in the outcome of the presidential election. President Muhammadu Buhari was contesting for the 5th time. 2003, 2007, 2011, and then up until 2015, he didn't get a kind of spread that he has received now. This is the first time some would say that President Muhammadu Buhari, as a candidate in the presidential election, has been able to win a quarter of the votes cast in 34 states of the Federation, plus the Federal Capital Territory. And those states, of course, include states in the South-South and states in the Southeast. What does this mean, Mukhtar Imam? It's the first time that he has had this kind of spread. His power base always was said to be the North, and then occasionally, when it came to 2015, it shifted to the Southwest.
Well, you see, all that has been said has made a lot of sense, but then I think we're missing certain points. Talking about Nigeria retrogressing and moving back to the period of the 1950s and all of that, I would, in my judgment, say it's not the fair assessment of our democratic journey. Democracy is not a destination, it's a journey, and we're gradually evolving through it. Speaking to what you have just mentioned, the truth is Nigerians are no longer docile. The thoughts in the First Republic political parties, the reality is what galvanizes our political structure, the formation of political parties within the Nigerian polity, has always been ethnic and religious inclinations or considerations, if you like. But the reality is, as time goes, we have been able to move past that. Yes, we haven't yet gotten there, but then we are making considerable progress. To speak to what you have just talked about, there are two basic things that have played out within the polity, coming from the last general election into this one. There would be, one, issues of logistics and technology and what impact they have made in our electioneering process. And then secondly, the issues of value, which speaks to what you have just talked about in the person of President Muhammadu Buhari and the spread that he has gotten in the just concluded election. The political culture is changing. The political socialization is changing. Yes, ultimately, as an umbrella concept, the political education within the Nigerian body polity has not made tremendous progress. But again, we are evolving. And that's the reason why, of course, we're beginning to see a spread as far as support for certain individuals are concerned. Yes, that ethnic and religious sentiment and inclination still plays out within our political space, but it doesn't mean that we still retain what's happened or has transpired from the First Republic period. And that's the reason why we're seeing people voting along the line which you have just mentioned. People are beginning to interrogate issues. Yes, we have not sufficiently done that, but we are gradually interrogating these issues and we're moving there. That's the reality on the issue of value. So basically what I'm trying to say is that our value system is gradually changing. And the reality is that people are beginning to, as a result of the awareness and the consciousness growing amongst Nigerians, judging from the 2015 general election into the 2019 general election, you will come to realize that people are beginning to put the primordial and ethnic and religious sentiment aside gradually. It is, yes, very significant. And as a matter of fact, this is not just a Nigerian consideration. It's an African problem. It is something that has been deep-rooted within the African political sphere. And that's the reason why scholars, philosophers have talked about the crisis in the African politics. And they mentioned the issue of the traditional institution, which we had in the past, and the struggle between that system and what we have today as modern liberal democracy. And Ali Mazaroi basically talks about us being in a state of communocracy. So that is a challenge that is within the entire African continent. And Nigeria has had and still has its fair share of it. And talking about logistics and technology and all the other issues within INEC, the smart card reader had its role. The primary responsibility or the primary function of the smart card reader was to, first of all, identify that that card which the individual holds belongs to INEC. And in most cases, it performed that function. Secondly, to also identify that the individual holding that card, in whose possession the card is actually the one who owns the card. It basically performed that function. The other issues are secondary issues. And that's the reason why there is the manual thing. So if the card doesn't identify you, you're returned to the manual. So basically what I'm trying to say is this: as far as our technological advancement and the involvement of technology into our electioneering process is concerned, we have considerably made some success. Yes, we've not gotten to that stage where we begin to talk about electronic voting and all of that, but we're gradually getting there as we evolve.
All right, thank you. I can see that you differ, slightly with Tony Abolo, our guest in Benin, with respect to the political socialization that has taken place lately in Nigeria as against what was obtainable in the 50s and 60s. And many Nigerians are as well reacting to this. But before that, let us just make it clear that from what we understand generally from this conversation, that politics in Nigeria is about permanent interest. And interest in the sense that, in fact, diverse interests. It could be religious, it could be ethnic, it could be economic, and what have you. And I think to a reasonable extent that played out in this election. That was why Kintley was noting the fact that President Buhari had a wider spread of followership this time around in terms of voting. But presently, Nigerians are reacting to our conversation by way of tweets. We'll look at the tweets before we take a short break on this conversation. So let's go to the tweets now. From Mohammed Mustafa.
Kieran, I think it's we understand that we have to go on a short break now before we take the tweets. So we'll take the tweets after the break. That's what the director is saying, yes.
A new edition of TV Guide is out with special focus on the role of the media in election coverage. Exclusive on the National Broadcasting Commission, its mandate as the sole regulator of Nigerian media. Dr. Toba Daba then and Ishak Modibo Kawu now. This edition also features the king of stand-up comedy in Nigeria, Ali Baba. NTA standards to be ready for election transmission after decades of abandonment. Find out from the DG transactional elections in our political space, an evil wind that blows no good. DG, National Orientation Agency cautions. Trading Guide, your indispensable companion, x-rays the impact of social media on electioneering process as electorates present their expectations from incoming government. Meet some TV professionals behind the screen and other inspiring stories in sports, entertainment, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria. Kieran, let's begin with the tweets.
Yes, the first one is from Mohammed Mustafa. He says it's all over. The winner has emerged, and that to commend INEC for a job well done, despite some challenges, and that is how losers lament in Nigeria. No matter how you try to make a good impression, some people won't commend your efforts.
And Law Alpha C has this tweet. Now, it's an improvement. That's to say the 2019 election is an improvement on what transpired in 2015, where accreditation and actual voting took too much time for a voter, leading to boredom.
Now, from Usman Banikantu, INEC should be commended for a job well done because the process was transparent, free, fair, and credible as adjudged by international observers. Those making criticisms are doing so out of frustration.
Now, Innocent Yawa James tweets, INEC should digitize its operation and stop over 90% paperwork. That will curb waste and improve on credibility, fairness, and sincerity, and above all, gain the trust of Nigerians.
Ahmed Ibrahim Idris, elections have been conducted peacefully. Congratulations to the winner, and my appreciation goes to all security agencies to ensure that the ensured elections went peacefully, and to NTA staff, plus national and international observers. We Nigerians really appreciate your efforts.
DW Nigeria, that's the Twitter handle. Now, this has been a keenly contested election, neck and neck kind of polls.
Still from DW, the results seem to show a lot of surprises. In some states, established old oligarchs have been removed by apparently new faces. In some, like Benue, Suswam has suddenly become an ally to the governor, probably because he has won his senatorial seat.
Ibrahim Moduaji tweets, now in every contest there is a winner and a loser. The winner should be magnanimous in victory and the loser should accept the outcome and the spirit of sportsmanship. Now the former President Goodluck Jonathan set the example, and let's try and build on this. Those are the tweets that we'll take immediately. Let's return to our guest, and my question, of course, is going to Ipia. I'll ask that question of Mukhtar Imam, and that has to do with seeking to understand the spread that President Buhari gained this time. Of course, you would have noticed that in the course of announcing the results, the media practitioners started to focus on number of states won. Number of states won is significant, but what matters is the number of votes and your spread. This is the first time President Muhammadu Buhari has secured a quarter of the votes cast in 34 states of the Federation, the only two exceptions being Anambra and Enugu. Now, in previous elections, the presumption was that Southeast, South-South, no-go areas, as it were, for the president. And of course, he had to struggle until 2015 in the Southwest. What are the factors, in your opinion, that account for the spread that the president has got? Is it on the basis of values changing, as Dr. Imam has said, or on the basis of key personalities who, in foraging for their own personal interests, have now sought to galvanize their own basis on the platform of the parties of the president's party, the APC, and strove to ensure that the president secured minimum quarter of the votes, and then, of course, also ramped up his overall numbers?
Well, let me submit, first of all, that the president would have done better. He would have gotten a better spread if he had shown a certain kind of leadership that the nation had lacked in the last 3 years plus. I will come back to these points. But speaking to your question, I think that, yes, it's because interests spread across the countries were galvanized and serviced. That is why, yes, on the political level, that is what has happened. And this is a throwback to 2015. President Buhari succeeded in 2015 because he reached out to the Southwest and basically was able to galvanize that bloc. You know, you can't wave aside the roles played by, the Jagaban himself, Asiwaju Tinubu and all of that. So that coalition, that alliance building was laid, that foundation was laid in 2015, and then it was built upon from what we have seen. That's why you see the spread in Southwest. You've seen powerful political interests get, carried into the mainstream, in Abuja, for instance, where you have a former governor who's also just won his seat to the Senate in Akwa Ibom. So this spread is as a result of, that's, let me use the word democratization in quotes of, the interest of individuals and all of that. Now, back to my earlier assertion. This is where I think that it's both a burden and a very heavy one at that on the president, because now the nation needs to heal. The nation needs to undertake serious nation building. The narratives and the communications that will issue from the president, including his famous body language, is very important at this point in time. What happened in 2015 is unfortunate, because the narrative was couched in such a way that, it didn't build national consensus, 97%, 5%, the issues of appointments, the issues of spread of offices and all of that. These things did not build confidence across the country. These things, they tended to make people, withdraw into their cocoon, So all of these were issues that if the president had been much more broad-minded, or if the administration had been much more broad-minded, probably I'm sure that ordinary Nigerians would have gone for him, you know, gone for the president, and I'm sure he would have done much more than we have seen.
Okay. Kirian, I mean, it's made its point, some of the complaints that we had over the year, but some would argue, in spite of that, you have seen the spread broaden for the president-elect now, who's the incumbent, in 2019, unlike what it was in 2015. So to interrogate it again, it's already talked about some of the key personalities who came up. I don't know whether, just before we, if you don't mind, before we bring in Austin Agbe, whether Mr. Tony Abolo in Benin would like to speak to this further, because he was talking about the politicians chasing their own interests, If you look at the key personalities, who not necessarily all of them, but the way politicians hop from one platform to the other, looking for the earliest, the most convenient platform, could this have played a role? You would have persons whom you didn't want, who you thought would not be in a certain political environment, found themselves in that environment, and so they were, as it were, virtually compelled for their own survival to also work for the president. Is that what played out at this time? And if so, how might this enable the president or the new administration carry forward in terms of its politics, in terms of its governance disposition?
A very interesting point that has been raised now, and that is to say that, yes, a lot of the politicians were working for survival. And like, of course, the chairman did say here in Benin City that if you join APC, your sins are forgiven. So why don't I move in and work for the president so that my sins are forgiven? So on that reason, it's possible that the spread is accounted for. Then again, you would also look at a factor when we're talking about personal interests. What is really playing out maybe majorly for that spread is 2023. Who will take the position? So you now find that maybe, if you like, the West is saying to themselves, maybe this is my chance, and maybe Yemi Oshibanjo would be the next man. So why don't we work for our 2023? Then also the Igbos are saying to themselves, come to think of it, we've played opposition politics. Why don't we imitate the Yorubas and what they are doing from the West and move into the national stream? So that would also account for the spread. But importantly, I also would like to join issues with join the views of my friend, which is that the president could have done far better than he did if only he carried everybody along. And that is what we expect, that we hope that this victory that has been announced makes him humble enough to say, where did I go wrong? And what can I do to build a nation? Because federal character principle that has been enshrined in the Constitution was thrown overboard, and we're just watching, actually scared. What is going on? And that, of course, accounted for why some votes didn't come. So we have to believe that if he thinks he wants to leave a legacy, because this time we're not talking about second term, it is about legacy. And if that legacy must come, then I want to see that he leads appropriately, moves this country into a modern, not just 21st century, a modern, competitive 21st century. And again, that all of us are carried along. Because if we're not carried along, I don't know what we can say of 2023. We might, like we're talking about violence and thuggery and all that, we don't know where it will go. So we like to believe that he will lead and lead us away from where we are to become, if we may define leadership, to enable and ennoble the people and lead them to their better selves. And we like to believe that in the next 4 years, he will lead us into our better selves and not leave us in these tatters.
All right. Thank you, Tony Abolo. In fact, the contributions of Tony Abolo and Mr. Pierre here is a clear indication that the president had a good spread, but perhaps he could have gone, further if he had done the things you raised. Well, that's your own opinions. But at this point, Kingsley, I've been wondering whether we should also think of the spread of Atiku Abubakar, the PDP presidential candidate, because of what this is the major outing for Atiku as an individual, and he garnered votes from all parts of this country.
So it did. But just to underscore that it was a presidential candidate in 2007.
But the spread was not as it is.
So
I'd like to ask Dr. Ibrahim Sadiq in our Maiduguri Network Center to try to speak to this, both the spread of Atiku Abubakar and that of Mr. President, who has now just been re-elected. Briefly, please.
Yes, thank you. You see, in discussing this matter, we have to juxtapose between the individual interests and organized public interest. Individual interest in this case has superseded the organized public interest because politicians, our own political elite, are always there. They are always in the political arena for what they will garner for themselves and maybe their own family. In most cases, you see, whenever you see elections taking place, it's always around personality calls. And what is in it for me? These are always the issues. Now, Atiku Abubakar is a new person not in politics, but I think this is the first time in his political career that he has reached this point where he has actually contested as a presidential candidate in general elections. So this is a very good development. But I think the spread is not about people like him or something, but I think there are issues there. You see, Buhari is from the north. Atiku is from the north. Buhari lost in Plateau State to Atiku, and he lost in Benue State to Atiku. He lost in Taraba to Atiku. Well, we should be looking at these issues. In Benue State, you see, we are talking about peace, this insurgency where you have the herdsmen disturbing them, the herdsmen disturbing the Plateau people, and then we have ethnic clashes almost every now and then in Taraba State. And certainly, they are making a statement by these votes. So the spread is about people actually craving for a change. Maybe they think they will have a better bargain in terms of peace, in terms of other infrastructural development. And the spread in the case of Buhari in the southwest and elsewhere is owing to the infrastructural development. If you go to the southwest, you go to the south, I think even in the southeast, the president has not done badly because today you can count, I think, so many infrastructural development with Fashola at the helm of affairs in the issue of infrastructure. I think we don't need to go further in explaining this. Then if you move to other parts, you see that Buhari is trying to woo them by transcending.
All right. At this point, we'd like to thank you immensely, Dr. Ibrahim Sadiq of the Department of Political Science, University of Maiduguri. Thank you indeed for your contribution this morning. We look forward to having you on another day on Good Morning Nigeria. All right. Gentlemen, we are back to Abuja studios here, and there's another aspect of this conversation that we need to take on. But before we do that, we've just been informed that we have another guest joining us much later in the course of this program from Just Network Center. But for now, we are back to Abuja once again. Gentlemen, let's... all right. We have established a link with the guest in the University of Jos. That's from Just Network Center. He is Samuel Obadia, Center for Conflict Management and Peace Studies, University of Jos. Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning and good morning, Nigerians.
All right, let's stay with you. I hope you've listened to other guests here in the studio, and you also participated in the just concluded elections. But we'd like to have your view on the overall performance of INEC, the electorate, and of course the outcome of the election?
Let me start with the electorate. I think the electorate were quite, sensitized. People came out, trooped out in their numbers to vote. And to a large extent, in quite a number of places, people were peaceful, they were orderly in their conduct. There were places where we had pockets of violence, places like Rivers, Lagos. Now, coming back to INEC, I think to a large extent, INEC was not totally prepared for this election because we had issues of failure of card readers, issues of, late arrival of voting materials. And I think to a large extent this hampered the smooth conduct of the election, And about security, the violence that we had in places like Lagos, Rivers, and quite a number of other places, to my mind, I think the security agencies, did not perform well in terms of providing adequate security for election materials in those places, Now, look at the statements the president made shortly before the election. Of course, about Togri. I think he shouldn't have made that statement. One way or the other, it helped in inspiring, talks to go all out in order to perform whatever they did. I am aware of the fact that in Plateau State, about 92,000 votes were cancelled in a ward. Simply, not for the failure of the people to actually go by the provisions of the election regulation, but because of the failure of INEC official. I think these are issues that raise a lot of concern, and I think that now that elections results have been declared and winners have emerged, we should be looking forward to sanitizing the electoral system, making sure that we don't have a repeat of what we've had. The governorship elections are coming in about or less than 2 weeks' time, and I think that we should have something better. I cannot imagine a situation whereby card readers will not authenticate people's thumbprints after it has authenticated that the cards are valid. Although, the law provides that they can go ahead to vote. But what about a situation whereby the card readers completely failed? I think that needs to be looked into. We are in the 21st century with all the resources provided to INEC. I think we should have something better than this.
All right, Samuel Obadiah, thank you very much. We hope we are able to return to you to get your closing thoughts. But one point I would like us to also deal with in terms of overall conduct, since we may not have enough time to press again into some of the numbers relating to the presidential election. My question is going to Austin Agbe, who was an observer, and perhaps OK Apia might also chip in here. During the off-cycle elections that we have had, the current INEC has conducted some 195 of them. There seemed to have emerged a notion, if not indeed an idea, that INEC had over time successfully blocked the many avenues that some unscrupulous politicians used to exploit for purposes of rigging the election. Well, here we are in 2019. One of the most obvious things that we have seen has been deliberate targeting of collation centers. What does this mean? Has this in any way disrupted the will of the voters to say, hey, listen, we have cast our votes. Let the results be the results that we have actually generated at the polling unit. What can this mean in terms of seeking to evaluate what went on in the first phase of the general elections for 2019? Austin.
You see, there's this general statement that good intention is not good enough. Every good intention put in place by INEC has been undermined by politicians. Every good intention to stop political maneuvering or to stop, let's take a case in study, vote buying, for example. With innovation by INEC, politicians have devised another means to counter that. And that's what led to all of this violence you saw in Lagos, for example, because huge vote is going to come from there and may not favor certain cabal or certain individuals or certain political parties. So what you need to do is to forget about buying vote now. Just go destroy it so that that vote doesn't add up to the final. So it's another way of, it's a measure. Or you target a particular state. You know that huge vote is going to come from this state. You undermine them with all manner of state apparatus, even if it's security architecture, to oppress or suppress voter from coming out to vote, or you go to another area to prevent people. Just Jikwe here, as early as 5:30 a.m., voters who were trying to make their way to the city center to vote, where they registered, security presence prevented them to access the city center because maybe the notion is that these people may vote in a particular dimension. So, speaking to INEC, because I thought I was going to speak to the spread, but let me, speaking to INEC.
You can speak to the spread when you finish this one, very briefly. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Okay. Speaking to INEC, there need to be, as we conclude this election, though if the winner has emerged, we are looking forward to 2023, we must revisit the Electoral Act very quickly, and it's right now. We must not wait in another year or two. We must begin to speak to innovation. We must begin to speak to all of the things we have observed now. I will argue, just quickly speaking to the spread, I will argue personally that President Buhari did not have the widespread vote. It had the wide political spread. Before now, in 2011, 2017, and all of that, it didn't have all of the support, as OK did point out. Now people want to go to the center. You remember the case of the then President Shagari and Edo State, Ambrutali, where when you are not connected to the center, certain privileges don't go to your state. So right now we are back, even though people may not argue that we are in back to where we are coming from. But the political narrative suggests that people are aligning to the center, and that must be addressed. We need a true federal state.
All right, let's stop you there because of one of time. And Opia will actually respond, essentially initially I asked. But what you raised that is so important now is the fact that the more the Electoral Act is revisited, the more politicians emerge with many more formats, of ensuring that they have their way. So speak to that as we conclude.
I like the use of the word format. It's unfortunate. But you see, I think that this continues to happen because we do not have measures in place activated to punish bad behavior. When politicians know that they can keep cheating on the system and get away with it, they will keep doing it. There are laws, and we must hold people to account. We must hold institutions to account. The off-cycle elections threw up challenges. Everybody saw it. We saw what happened in Osun too. We saw what happened with the security agencies. Everybody forgot that, and we moved on to where we are. And some of those issues were repeated blatantly. Can we not call security agents to account? Can we not review and, thoroughly interrogate the roles that they play? It's a good thing that INEC has prosecuted to almost, I think, to conviction some of its staff in the last that were, said to have, compromised the last elections. But beyond INEC, other stakeholders, like I keep making the point, have a role to play. We must interrogate the roles that they play and hold them to account. All of these malfeasances and deficiencies, shortfalls we have seen in these elections, it must not be let to stay away. We must also stop this habit of dumping everything at the courts. Let the court decide, because that's also one thing that emboldens the politicians. They will move the battles to the courts and probably find a way to have their way. Beyond the courts, can we not hold institutions to account and demand that you must discharge your responsibilities in the way and manner that, the Constitution and the law provides for?
All right. Okay, Pierre, and all the other guests would like to appreciate you. One issue I was going to raise, we don't have the time now. Cancellation of votes or voting. is it an abuse of discretionary powers of the electoral officers? That's something that we can probably take up at some point, Kyria. Because if we are seeing these huge numbers, of votes just being cancelled, if that and that, what else? If the precipitate factors encourage the cancellation of votes, then it means that those persons who have voted are disenfranchised. So how do you address this disenfranchisement?
And discourage people from the turning out on voting days.
Absolutely.
When you're not sure their vote is going to count.
Absolutely, Kyria. We can't take that now. But we'd like to appreciate all our guests who've been with us. Samuel Obadiah, who joined us last, is of the Center for Conflict Management and Peace Studies at the University of Jos. Sam, thank you very much for your insights in our conversation this morning. And also from our Benin Network Center, senior media personality, public affairs analyst, Mr. Tony Abolo from our Benin Network Center. Once again, the depth of our appreciation to you. And here with us in the Abuja studios, we'd like to thank Austin Agbe, election observer, and is also a senior program officer of the Center for Democracy and Development. Thanks a lot for being around. And we also would like to thank Dr. Mukhtar Imam, is a lecturer in the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy at Bayes University here in the Federal Capital Territory. Mukhtar, thanks for being around.
Thank you for having me.
And okay, Pierre, Executive Director, Other Paper Nigeria. That's a multi-platform media organization dedicated to reporting legislative activities. Okay, thanks a lot for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so that does it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We'd like to thank you for tuning in. We are back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do enjoy the rest of your day. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Kirin Umayo, thanking you too for being part of our show today. Tomorrow is yet another day for Good Morning Nigeria. Join us then.